I'll just run through the same housekeeping stuff that you've probably heard a million times now. If you can, we'd prefer to use the Q&A for any questions for any of the speakers. But we recognise that sometimes that doesn't work for everyone. So if you've got a question but you can't use Q&A, would you put it into the chat, but either start with a Q or question beforehand so we can differentiate it from the rest of the chat. Just a reminder, the session's being recorded, but only the speakers, none of the Q&A will be recorded. You can turn captions on if you want to by clicking the three dots at the top of the screen, then selecting Settings, Accessibility, and toggling the Always Show Captions in My Meetings. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over now to Will Grady and David Haig from Manchester Metropolitan University and their paper, Bibliotech, Navigating the AI Frontier Through a Library Working Group. Over to you.
Thank you, Nikki. So hi, I'm David. I'm a Library Systems and Discovery Advisor at MMU, LSD Advisor for short.
And I'm Will Grady. I'm a collections librarian at Manchester Metropolitan University also. In this paper, we want to share with you what our library is doing in response to AI. While this, of course, does include things like student support, in this paper, we want to pay particular attention to the ways in which we are supporting library staff around the rise of AI and, building their confidence in this kind of new area, shall we say. So along the way, we're going to showcase some of the programming we've got lined up, such as training sessions, and then also develop on the kind of this working group that we've designed to kind of organize this activity that goes along with all the stuff around AI that's going on. So I'm going to pass over to David now.
Thank you, Will. So yeah, just to start with, we've got a little introduction to something that probably needs little introduction at this point. But essentially here we've got two definitions of artificial intelligence. I ran it through all sorts of different things, but basically the summary which we've got in bold here that you get from everything, be it person written guidance such as the MMU staff guidance or indeed Perplexity or any other generative AI guidance, is this idea of it referring to the ability of machines or computer systems to mimic human intelligence and cognitive functions, or similarly capable of tasks commonly associated with human capabilities. We just thought we'd draw out the sort of the two different strands here. And as well point out through the MMU guidance, we cannot unfortunately use any pictures or other AI generated things, so there'll be no fun pictures or anything. They haven't given specific guidance about teams' backgrounds though, however, so as long as Will doesn't tell me, I think we'll be okay. Anyway, now over to Will for some more about AI specifically within libraries.
So yeah, at this point, you're probably very familiar with AI at this point in the conference. But of course, just as a sort of basic backdrop, you're probably familiar that ChatGPT was launched in November 2022, and this is kind of the start of this rise in this phenomenon of AI chatbots that came about. Generative AI kind of works on that kind of call and response basis. You write a question in, AI pulls information from around the web and gives you a sort of fairly detailed response. In terms of higher education, chatbots tend to be used as a form of research assistant. So, again, you write your research question in and ChatGPT gives you, or another AI tool gives you, a massive response to your query. Although it is fair to point out that these sort of AI tools aren't very good research assistants. If they don't know the information, they have a tendency to lie, fabricate information. They don't back up the sources all the time, so you don't know where they're pulling the information from. And so then if we drill a bit deeper down into this, it's that question of, well, where do academic libraries fit into this? And the impact of AI comes through in a sort of a few different ways. So libraries are naturally kind of that space in which we're at the heart of supporting info skills effectively. Students come to us with their sort of AI queries because they want to use it in assignments, so they're coming to us to ask, well, how can they use it? What are the ethical issues surrounding that? Also going back to that idea of ChatGPT and others being an unreliable source of research assistance, we are having students and staff asking ChatGPT and the like, write me a reading list or a list of articles articles on a certain subject, and then these tools may not know the answer, so they just make up the sources. And then, of course, we're getting staff and students requesting these items through interlibrary loans and reading lists, and that's, then we're running around looking for items that don't exist. So these are kind of the real-term impacts of AI on libraries, and this is kind of where we start the conversation now, because in the library, at MMU Library, we were like, well, how do we respond to this? How do we prepare for this new technology that's clearly going to impact us going into the future? And one of the ways was we developed a workshop called From Books to Bots, which was delivered to library staff to sort of introduce AI and showcase some of the various AI tools on offer. And so I'm going to pass on to David now to talk through that in a bit more detail.
Thank you. So yes, as Will mentioned, we set up a session called From Books to Bots, which essentially, as you can see, was initially really about starting a conversation on a sort of institution, that be the library, wide level, and not just starting this conversation, but kind of creating a culture in which we could continue it and continue to sort of develop it and keep in touch with people, and basically make an interconnected network, which we'll talk a bit more about later, and pull the strands of thoughts about AI and generative AI specifically and so on together into a cohesive unit. Practically, this was, essentially, on the one hand, we need to be there for the students. We need to have the right level of knowledge, and this needs to be spread throughout the teams. So we can properly engage with the students, give them advice, and give them advice confidently, which is always really key. And as well as understanding this sort of level of knowledge, we also needed to get the ranges across the staff and sort of get a base from which we could build up future sessions and tailor future sessions. And then also we needed to look at something specifically. We wanted there to be a hands-on element to this, even though it was quite early in the sort of emergence of a generative AI in a way that really engaged people and brought people's awareness of it up. And so the things we touched on here were things like awareness of AI research and discovery tools from Research Rabbit and Research Body, LLMs, your classics, your ChatGPTs, Perplexities, and of course Copilot, which we're expecting to be more and more integrated as time goes on. But also touching on things like ethical concerns and so on, and making sure people were aware of these, because these are the sort of competency areas that we really wanted to touch on. And of course, sticking to the Man-Met policy and guidance, even if that includes getting rid of all your nice AI-generated pictures for your presentation. Thank you, Will. Next slide.
It's not working. There we go.
So for the structure, essentially, we began with definitions of AI. So we had kind of sets of different presenters for each part, which I'll break down in a minute. But initially, we wanted a conversation, giving some facts out to people who might have less knowledge about it, but also engaging people and seeing what they thought about it. From that point, we moved on to ethical and privacy implications. So this was sort of like addressing hurdles and barriers to implementation and using AI, and concerns around it. So after this, once we sort of addressed these concerns, where and when you could and couldn't be used and where it was potentially hazardous, we then moved on to the opportunities and potentials, which, I mean, both sides of these had really good engagement, because there is a lot of kind of positive and negative concerns and opportunities we can have with AI. And I think people really recognized that and wanted to reflect their own opinions. And finally, penultimately, we had the sort of hands-on section. So this is where we had people trying out generative AIs, using the research ones. And because we had this ad hoc structure where it was about 30 people, 30 attendees for an hour, 30 minutes, we got really good mixed groups. You had lots of teams interacting with people from other teams that really got the conversation started and continuing. And part of the conclusion was just to offer more resources and encourage people to experiment and come back to us with any questions. And then as for the outcomes, so as I said at the start, we were really looking to get an overall understanding of where staff knowledge was at, and then be able to build this up. We have really positive levels of engagement, which really helped this. And the lively debate has carried on. and really it informed where we go to next, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The approach, like I say, it was not a safe space in the sense that it was something totally without any worry, because there was a lot of concern, but it was a safe space and that anyone could experiment, and it was sort of derived around the idea of play and seeing where these tools can take us, or indeed where we can take these tools, hopefully. And so to sort of capitalize on this and really focus it down, we had initial feedback forms, and we followed this up with staff meetings involving Padlets, which we'll talk about a bit more later. And from these, we were able to sort of draw out the key themes and build up into sessions such as our Books to Bots 2 session, which we're planning because of how quickly things have moved on. And other than this continued development, we also wanted to sort of formalize the structures, such as the AI working group that we'd brought in already, and really give these a place to continue this development from a formal setting. Will.
So I'm going to take on from this point, and it was just like, I think from Books to Bots was like a really useful start point to start like the conversations in the library around like AI in higher education in libraries very specifically. But I didn't want to. I just wanted to briefly preface this to sort of say, you know, around the university there is other ownership around AI. So MMU has like a series of guides around using generative AI in learning and teaching. But of course, because there's very specific things that impact upon the library, we did want to take ownership for ourselves and our own local kind of more internal department. So we decided to make a AI working group. And the working group is composed of 10 different library staff, and that's diverse in terms of departments. So it's not just the digital team, but it's the teaching team, customer services, collections. They're all represented. And it's also diverse in terms of role. It's not managerial led, but there's obviously assistants in there too. There's coordinators, librarians. So again, it's across teams, and so diverse in them terms anyway. And we're driven by these two questions that I pose on this slide, which is of course like how can we help the communities that we support? So things like the researchers and the students that are naturally using AI and so are coming to us with questions, and so it kind of by virtue of that we do also need to consider how are we supporting our staff, library staff that is. You know, they have to be able to give confident, you know, clear, knowledgeable answers to students about these sort of issues and these tools that they're using, and so we need to build library staff confidence in this area. So that's quite an important dimension of our working group as well. And there's a lot of activity associated with the working group. So I think naturally a part of that is things like horizon scanning. It is looking at what kind of tools are on the market, what things are on the horizon and coming up, how can we use them in the library? It's not necessarily that we're going to use everything because there's lots of tools. But again, it's very important that we are, you know, out there and looking at what's coming up in the future. Another thing is about learning best practice, and that could be internally at MMU, what other departments are using AI, how are they using it to support their students, or it could be looking at the wider HE community. It could be looking at, you know, other academic libraries are doing. So of course, this conference in itself is quite a good opportunity to, you know, learn best practice. It's been really cool today already to see what other libraries are doing. I've been quite inspired. So, but I won't tell you what ideas I'm robbing from you all. Anyway, and so the other kind of core dimension of that is sort of strategic projects. So today, as I've already mentioned, we're not going to focus too deeply on the student-focused support. Funnily enough, Nick Gregory, who is talking about this in a session right now. So that's, we don't want to steal Nick's thunder. So we're going to focus, of course, on the staff-focused support. And so one of the first things we did was we thought, well, we'll need to engage library staff and sort of work out, you know, what kind of training needs they've got, what support they need in AI, what are their questions. So we attended an all-staff meeting where we posed a series of questions to the team and they could respond with their feedback using Padlets. For anyone that doesn't know what a Padlet is, it's like a shared area, shared document. You pull out your device, we ask a question, you respond using a device, and we can collate that then responses. So I've pulled some of them. This is just some of them, and I appreciate the writing is tiny, but I will talk them through. And this isn't isn't all of them. This is just a small snapshot. So one of the questions we posed was, what would you like to know about AI? And so we have some sort of responses like, what are the different AI tools? Is there a list or overview of which are the best ones to use and for what purpose? We've got a very specific question around Copilot. Will there be training on this? This is because our university is investing in Copilot and going to roll that out. Copilot is the Microsoft AI package. So that's a very specific question for a very specific need, I guess. How can I embed AI into my day-to-day work? I think that's a really important question. I think there is that worry of, using AI for using AI's sake. And so I think you really do need to demonstrate the actual use and value of AI. Because I mean, if it's not going to improve on your working day, I mean, there's no point in just saying, oh, I used it before to write an email. But so yeah, I think there is an importance around trying to demonstrate that value. And again, it followed on by this another question further down that says, how can we become more efficient? So I think that's really, like that awareness that, you don't necessarily have to use AI unless it is actually going to improve your working day. Regular sessions. So this was, of course, that session that talking about is from Books to Bots, and that acknowledgement that they would prefer to have like regular sessions like that. So that's really good feedback for the team. We also asked a question about, is there anything you'd like to ask or tell the AI group? And one of these sort of responses was, what are the best prompts to use? This refers to what I mentioned before about that call and response kind of nature of generative AI. If you ask a question, it gives you an answer that's not great. You might tease out more information by prompting it with extra questions, additional information, and so I think it's just again trying to get a better handle on the technology, this with prompt engineering. But of course I'd be remiss not to mention the two core questions on all library staff's lips, which is AI going to kill us? And of course a literary reference. We're a library staff, of course, so we need to represent our bibliotech kind of bibliographic information. Anyway, there was more core takeaways to take from that than just, is AI going to kill us, of course. And I think these are kind of from the sort of the responses we got on the Padlet, it's clear that there is a sort of a staff training need for specific AI tools. So we will be putting a session in place specifically for Microsoft AI package Copilot. And we're also going to run a session on prompt engineering, and we're going to, a guest speaker, I think they may be from the science or the IT department, I can't remember, but it's very cool that we are, getting, programming in place. And that's not necessarily just for us. So the team on the help desk, it's really important that they have a good grasp of how to use Copilot and what are, the best prompts to use, because they're going to get asked these questions on the help desk. So yes, maybe they won't be using Copilot on a day-to-day, but students may do more so. So it's quite valuable that staff have a good handle on these sort of technologies that are coming in. There's obviously a demand for AI support. So at the minute we're collating the various types of or FAQs, if you will, of the types of questions we get on the help desk via email in our outreach sessions. And then we're going to develop guidelines to respond to these sort of FAQs. Purely just so there's more cohesion around the answers we're giving, and the correct information hopefully that we're giving. And we're aware that we're building up staff at the minute with AI knowledge, but we're worried that if new starters come into the library team, how are we supporting them? So we want to create a standalone resource to build them up alongside us building up current library staff. And of course, finally, continued outreach. So From Books to Bots 2.0 is currently in the works, and I'm very inspired by today. So so there'll probably be some ideas I've took today that will possibly go into that. So this is kind of some of the things we've got in the pipeline, for support for library staff. But I'm going to now pass to David to finish off, and we're just going to touch on sort of the implementation of AI in the workplace.
So yeah, as Will says, these are things we've got in the pipeline, and some things that are almost a bit more pipe dream. But for the most part, we really wanted to focus on some initial integrations that were something more than just knowledge or awareness or using the occasional LLM. Because as Will says, we're going to continue to need to integrate this, and it's going to continue to be a factor as each new generation of students and staff come in. So obviously we got people to try out the LLMs, and generally we find like a mix, a range of uses of different LLMs, ChatGPT, Perplexity, etc. We've also delved into Power Automate, where you can sort of automate little repetitive tasks, be that reminders to the team about an upcoming meeting, or saving a message from Teams to your OneNote, or scheduling a meeting at the next available time with your manager. All these little things can basically be, it's low code. It's sort of essentially little boxes you can drag around or templates you can copy. But it's a really good way of just shortening a few tasks and getting into the idea of it, and getting a little used to coding. And also, we just generally encourage people to try it and come to us when rather than if they got stuck. We also had experimentation with AI image generation. Adobe's Firefly was the main one we used for that because it's part of the package we already get. I wanted to mention briefly, we had some interns recently do an AI UX study with students within the library, which was actually really, really interesting to compare to the information we got from the staff from the Books to Box sessions, etc. And members of the digital team also set up a sort of rules-based chatbot, so not on LLM, although we have been looking into that in the more pipe dream sort of things, but essentially a little chatbot for our out-of-hours service, just to sort of kind of keep us up to date in that regard. And as for prospective implementations, we talked about Books to Box 2. We've got an AI project to aid discovery of digitized materials in the works in our special collections. We've looked at the various ways, and we're trying to encourage the various ways that Copilot, etc., are being integrated, because that is going to continue to increase. So the more kind of knowledge and awareness people have, the more likely they are to use these things integrated within systems we already have. And finally, there's the things like experimental spaces. So while augmented and virtual reality might not be AI, they are going to be heavily influenced by it. The way in which we interact with it, create spaces and so on is. And so within the Books to Box session, for example, we had a small part on this because it's another way that AI is enhancing the offering of something, which in turn can enhance our offering. And so moving on to the conclusion. We just wanted to kind of highlight the kind of key areas in our strategy and reaction to the emergence of generative AI specifically, and all the technologies around it. And for the most part, this was about creating a structured time and space to discuss things, but also encouraging a sort of bottom-up way of thinking about these things and discussing them, not dictating what should be used, but finding what's being used, what's useful, and working through it this way, whilst having an established framework and team and working group to consolidate it and make it into something actionable, and spread it amongst the teams. And finally, just to remember that it's an iterative process for an iterative landscape. And how fast AI is changing even since our first session. It's really something that you can never know fully, but have to sort of keep abreast of and keep rolling on the stone, as you would say. But I shall pass over to Will for some final thoughts.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was going to end this because it was just going to be a couple of sentences where I just say, oh, it'd be interesting to hear. I hope this has resonated, and it'd be interesting to hear what other libraries are doing. But it's been quite revalidating in a way, seeing some of the presentations from earlier, because I feel like some libraries are up to similar things to us at the minute. So it's been quite kind of reassuring that we're all on the same track. But obviously, perhaps there's more to learn. It's kind of an ever-changing process and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, no, I welcome questions anyway, and thank you for attending and engaging.
Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much to Will and David for that. Joe, have you got your hand up to ask a question?